"Dad, even your own grandchildren are embarrassed of you." That's what my son said to me, standing up in the middle of my own dining room, in front of my brother, his wife, and the two grandkids I'd spent all week preparing a Thanksgiving dinner for. The room went silent. My granddaughter's face crumpled in confusion. And I just sat there, holding a dessert plate, realizing 30 years of sacrifice had just been reduced to one sentence at a dinner table. I rose to my feet, smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you for finally showing them who you really are." Then I walked out of my own house. By sunrise, my son was pounding on my front door, begging me to let him explain. But by then, I'd already made a decision that would change everything between us. Let me back up. My name is Robert Hale. I'm 61 years old. I wasn't always the man sitting alone at the head of a long table, basting a turkey at 5 in the morning because that's what my late wife, Diane, used to do, and somebody had to keep doing it. I used to be a husband, a father of 2, a man who believed that if you worked hard enough, loved hard enough, and showed up every single time, your family would never have a reason to doubt you. Diane died when Ethan was 11 and his sister, Hannah, was 14. Ovarian cancer. Fast and brutal, the kind that doesn't give you time to prepare a child for a world without their mother. I quit my second job and worked double shifts instead because grief doesn't pay the mortgage. I learned how to braid Hannah's hair badly, sign permission slips alone, be both parents at once, and I never once complained where my kids could hear me. Ethan took it hardest. He stopped talking for almost a year after Diane passed. I used to sit on the edge of his bed every night until he started talking again. I thought that closeness would last forever. I was wrong. Belle, quick question before we go further. What's the one sacrifice your parents made for you that you didn't fully appreciate until much later? Tell me in the comments and subscribe if stories like this hit home, because this one gets a lot heavier. Asterisk, asterisk. Things started changing when Ethan went to college. Not all at once. Slowly, the way a tide goes out without you noticing until you look up and the shoreline is gone. Phone calls that used to last an hour shrank to 5 minutes. Visits home became shorter, then less frequent, then mostly happened only around holidays, and even then, with an excuse already prepared for why he couldn't stay long. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They build their own lives. I didn't want to be the father who guilt-tripped his son into calling more. So I stayed quiet. I stayed patient. I kept showing up the way I always had, even when it felt like I was the only one still trying. Then Ethan married Rachel. I liked Rachel, at first. Polite, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who remembered your birthday. But somewhere along the way, I noticed how Ethan's tone changed whenever she was in the room. The way he'd glance at her before answering a simple question, as if checking for approval. The way certain topics, money, his upbringing, me, became things he'd quietly steer conversations away from whenever she was nearby. I told myself I was imagining it. So when Ethan called in October and said he and Rachel and the kids, Lily and Sam, wanted to come for Thanksgiving, I nearly wept with relief. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I dug out Diane's old tablecloth, the one with faded autumn leaves stitched along the border, the one I hadn't used since she died, because using it without her felt like its own kind of grief. I used it that year. I wanted the table to look the way it used to. A few days before the holiday, I had a quiet phone call with my attorney about something I'd been putting off for almost 2 years. Paperwork I wasn't sure I'd ever actually go through with. I told him to hold off finalizing anything until I called him back. I didn't know yet that I'd be calling him back sooner than either of us expected. When my son's family arrived, the grandkids ran straight into my arms the way kids do before the world teaches them not to. For a few hours, the house was loud and warm and full again, and I let myself believe, stupidly, hopefully, that maybe this was the beginning of something getting better between Ethan and me. Belle, if you've ever told yourself, maybe this time things will be different with someone who kept letting you down, comment, "I know that feeling" below, and stick with me, because the next part is where everything fell apart. Dinner went well, at first. Rachel complimented the stuffing. The kids ate more pie than turkey. Ethan was quieter than usual, but I told myself it was just a long drive catching up with him. I should have noticed the way he kept glancing at his phone. I should have noticed the way Rachel's smile never quite reached her eyes whenever she looked at me. Hindsight does that. It hands you a flashlight after the room's already gone dark. After dinner, Ethan stood up and tapped his glass with a fork.
Ting, ting, ting.
The room went still. My brother set down his coffee. Rachel's hands folded tightly in her lap. The kids, sensing the shift, went quiet too. I think it's time everyone heard the truth, he said, looking directly at me. Dad, even your own grandchildren are embarrassed of you. They hear the way you talk, how you make everything about sacrifice, about how hard you had it.
It's exhausting.
Nobody wants to be around that. Silence crashed over the table. My brother opened his mouth, then closed it. Rachel stared at her plate. Not his mother, because his mother was gone, but in that moment, I understood that even the people who should have defended me had already decided whose side they were on, and it wasn't mine. I felt something quieter than rage, the hollow recognition of a truth I'd been avoiding for years, finally spoken out loud in front of witnesses. I rose to my feet, smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you for finally showing them who you really are." Then I walked past the table, past the untouched pie, past my grandchildren's frightened faces, grabbed my coat and keys, and walked out into the cold November air. Well, before I tell you what happened at sunrise, I want to know, have you ever had to walk away from your own family just to protect what was left of your dignity? Type "I have" below and subscribe, because what I did the next morning surprised even me. ****. I drove for almost 2 hours with no destination, ending up at a small diner off the interstate. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ethan. I let it ring out, then turned the phone off entirely. I checked into a motel a few miles off the highway and didn't sleep much, replaying his voice over and over, steady, certain, telling a room full of people that his own children were embarrassed of me. By sunrise, I had made a decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity, the kind that only comes once you've stopped fighting for something that was never going to fight back for you. I drove home around 7. Ethan's car was already in my driveway. He was sitting on the front steps in yesterday's clothes, looking like he hadn't slept either. "Dad." His voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." I didn't answer right away. I unlocked the door and walked inside, and he followed, words spilling out of him. I don't even know why I said that. Rachel and I had a fight before we even got there, about money, about her parents, and it just came out, and I keep seeing Lily's face. I started making coffee, calm and deliberate, the opposite of the chaos pouring out of him. I poured 2 cups and sat down across from him. "You weren't answering your phone," he said. "I turned it off." "Why?" "After standing in front of your wife, your uncle, your own children, and telling everyone I was an embarrassment, what exactly did you think I'd say?" He flinched. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "You meant it enough to say it out loud," I said. "In front of Lily, who's going to grow up wondering whether it's okay to talk about her grandfather that way, because she watched her own father do it." I reached beneath the table for a folder I'd brought home the night before, the one my attorney had finished preparing that very week, and slid it across to him. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside were copies of bank statements going back 20 years, tuition payments, car payments, every wire transfer I'd sent when he called in his 20s saying he was short on rent. Beneath that, a property deed. Beneath that, a letter with his name across the top. "Dad, this is the deed to the house." "Yes." "It says it's been transferred."
"Yes."
"To a foundation that supports single fathers raising children alone after losing a spouse. The kind of support I never had when I needed it most." The color drained from his face. "You're giving away the house? This is where I grew up." "It was," I said quietly. "It isn't anymore. Things change, Ethan. You taught me that yesterday in front of everyone." He picked up the letter with trembling hands and read it out loud, voice breaking on nearly every line. "I didn't lose you yesterday at that table. I lost you slowly. Over years, every time a phone call got shorter, every time you let someone else's comfort matter more than my feelings. Yesterday wasn't the moment I lost you. It was just the moment I finally admitted it to myself. He covered his face with both hands. "Dad, I didn't know you felt this way." "That's the part that hurts most," I said. Not knowing doesn't erase what happened. It just means you weren't paying attention. He asked about the grandkids, whether they'd still be welcome. Always, I said. This was never about punishing them. It was about finally protecting myself from people who forgot that love has to be shown, not just assumed. Before he left that morning, I told him one last thing. I love you, Ethan. I will always love you. But love isn't proven by staying somewhere you're not wanted, even if that somewhere is your own family. I needed you to understand that, even if it took losing this house for both of us to finally learn it. He left quietly, and for the first time in years, I watched my son's car pull out of the driveway without feeling the familiar ache of being left behind. I felt something unexpected instead.
Something like peace.
That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Diane's tablecloth still on it, and I finally said out loud what I'd been afraid to admit for years. I didn't lose my son at that table on Thanksgiving. I lost a version of myself who thought silence was the price of being loved. I'm not paying that price anymore. Red Heart, if this story meant something to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and be honest in the comments. Would you have walked out that night, or stayed and tried to fix it right there at the table? I read every comment. Asterisk, asterisk.